Good evening, everyone. Let's give it up for our Walk the Talk band. Yes. Now listen, every time you hear them playing over here, I need you to do a little dance, okay? We're gonna have fun tonight. Matter of fact, everybody get up. Can you play us something upbeat real fast? And it's okay, if you don't know how to dance, just do a little two-step. Hey! Do a little dance. We love you unconditionally. We like to have fun at WalkTheTalk. Give yourself a round of applause. So my name is Lindsey Vertner, and I am your Walk the Talk speaker series host for tonight's event on Unconditional Love. So I want to share a quote with you. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "You cannot drive out darkness with more darkness. Only light can do that. You cannot drive out hate with more hate. Only love can do that." Think about that. Only love can drive out hate. And unfortunately, our world is running rampant with hate right now. So many people hate other people for their race or their cultures. And even more of us have hate for ourselves. We hate our bodies. We hate our hair. We hate the things that we have not achieved because we put conditions on our love. We put conditions on how we choose to display love to others. So what is unconditional love? To love unconditionally, that means to love without limits, to love without conditions, despite whatever flaws may be present. What type of world would we live in if we loved our neighbors unconditionally? How would we improve the quality of our lives if we loved ourselves unconditionally? So before I introduce our speakers tonight, I want to introduce to you our Walk the Talk juniors. We traveled all the way to Avondale Meadows Academy to interview the students and find out what is their take on love. And what's the meaning of love to them? Check it out.
Love to me means respectfulness when you love someone, like your mom loves you by taking care of you.
I love my mommy when we make cookies together and when we go shopping.
It's important for people to be loved because they don't want to be not happy because the person don't love them.
Love to me means everything, and everything means love.
Love to me means caring about each other, and no matter what they look like, what they sound like, how they act, I will do anything for them.
I feel love when my mom, if I'm going through something bad, like the funeral yesterday, and someone talks to me about it, I feel much better.
When my mom takes care of me when I get hurt on my bike, she helps me calm down when I'm crying, give me a Band-Aid.
My mommy gives me a kiss every day when I go to school.
I feel much love when it's my birthday and they say happy birthday to me.
I show people love by I do a lot of stuff for them, like I'll make them breakfast, I'll clean up their room, I'll do my chores without nobody saying it to me.
I show someone love by helping them, being respectful, and listening to what they say.
I give love by helping my mommy clean up and helping her make cakes and cookies and cupcakes.
Love is important because then you can feel more comfy and safe around others.
Love is important because sometimes people don't feel like they love, but their parents love them, but they don't feel like it. So I feel like it's very important because you have to share the love.
Did you hear those last words? Out of the mouths of babes, right? Love is very important because you have to share it. You can't just hold it on to yourself. You have to share it with others. So you are going to hear 6 different stories on unconditional love from 6 phenomenal women as they share their own perspectives on what unconditional love means to them. Now, as you're listening to each speaker, I want you to take a nugget from each one and figure out how you can implement that into your own life every day. So our first speaker is all the way from Colombia and has only moved to the States just 6 years ago. She has a very calming spirit about her, and I know you'll love her too. Please welcome Juanita Molano Parra to the stage.
Today we're going to talk about unconditional love. We use this expression so often, we sometimes forget what it actually means. It's love without conditions. I love numbers and spreadsheets, not unconditionally, but deeply. And so in Excel terms, it's not if blank, then love. It's just equal love. When I think about unconditional love, the first thing that comes to mind is the love from parents to their children. It's what I often hear parents talk about, and what my parents must have felt for my siblings and I to love us despite how not so lovely we often were, and sometimes still are. I also think for the love of my siblings. When I was 5, I got the greatest gift of all, twin siblings, a boy and a girl at the same time. They're probably the first people that I ever felt unconditional love towards. No matter where we were, what they were doing, no matter how big of a fight we are in or how far away we live, I just love them for no other reason than because they're them. The latest one on my mind is the love for my partner. After 5 years of being together, we decided to get married and promised to love each other forever. This one is a little different because this one I chose. Now, we talk about all these different types of love. The ones we are born into, the ones we choose, the ones that life gives us. All this from us to others. And we don't often talk about the love for ourselves, especially not in terms of unconditional love. Like many things in our lives, we spend so long pouring ourselves out that we lose sight of what is within, and we end up running on empty. The thing in those moments is that it doesn't matter how much you love your parents, your siblings, your friends, your family, you just don't have the fuel to be there for them. That is why today I want to focus on self-love. Now, to talk about this, I have to start where it began for me, and that is in self-loathe. I have always been really hard on myself. Since I was a little girl, I was very strict with the way things have to be. I was brilliant at math and numbers, but not so good in literature. Great weapon to use against myself. No matter how good my math grades were, I would always find a way to put myself down because of the not so good literature ones. And so I picked up weapons here and there. You're not good in literature, so you're not really smart enough. You're not skinny like other girls, so you're not really pretty. You have a hard time talking to strangers and you're kind of shy, so you're probably going to be alone forever. And so my arsenal grew, and with that, self-loathing became a habit. The wounds grew deeper and stronger, and because I did not know any better, I just took it as something else that was wrong with me and that I had to feel bad about, making the habit even stronger. The theme here was, if blank, then love, else loathe. At some point in my mid-20s, I started to question this whole setup. I've been so sad for so long. I keep hurting myself with guilt and shame and hate, and it's only been a quarter of my life. No way this is what life is supposed to be about. And so the day before my 25th birthday, I started working with a therapist. It was this unconventional, wise, wonderful woman, and she helped me see myself through an entirely different lens. She gave me tons of homework in between sessions, had me reading books, repeating phrases like, I love myself, I accept myself, I approve of myself. She had me write on my mirror, I am awesome, and it was one of the most uncomfortable things to do. It felt icky and weird and just so far from true. Actually, more uncomfortable than that was looking at my face in the mirror as I said those words. These were all short sentences. It wasn't, I approve of myself because of XYZ. It was just, I approve of myself, full stop. These were just the first steps in my self-love journey. It started with noticing there was such a thing. I could actually love me, and I could practice loving me. Things like thankfulness to myself in the morning, or looking at myself in the mirror and giving me words of encouragement or endearment or acknowledgement. Doing nice things like getting coffee or giving myself a mani-pedi. About a year after I started therapy, I moved from Colombia to New York to get my MBA at NYU. In this, I totally loved myself. Not only an MBA in the US, not only New York, not only a great school, but with a scholarship. All those years of good grades, of corporate experience, all the cramming of the GMAT and the TOEFL and applications and all the big projects, it all paid off. I'm not saying this to gloat. I'm saying this for you to notice what the love was for. I didn't just love myself. I loved myself because of all these things, all these conditions. The thing with conditions is that they won't last. They're temporary. And then so is the self-love. And at any point, it can just fall. I think that's actually what happened as I went to business school. When I started, I realized everybody there had the same accomplishments as I did, or more. They were smarter, they had more experience, or at least that's how I saw it. I was far from being top of the class, and I actually struggled to get a job before graduation. All these conditions that I had set up for loving myself, the grades, the salaries, the roles, all these conditions were challenged. At the same time, I discovered other things, and I think that's what kept me out of the downward spiral. I discovered fun workouts as a way to love me and not as a way to change who I am. I got to live in New York. I made new friends, I got a boyfriend. It was still conditions, it just gave me more to choose from. In the end, I did get a good job. I got to stay in New York, and my partner and I moved in together. It was all pretty sweet. And I kept on with my self-love practices. Then 2 years later, I started rocking the boat again. My partner moved back to Indy, where he's from, and then a few months after that, my company got shut down. So I decided to move to the Midwest over that summer. As you can imagine, some of my conditions started to fall again. Here I was in Indianapolis, no job, no friends, nothing to show for myself. And with that, my weapons came up. You got a new job, but it doesn't pay as much as before or as much as your peers, so you're not actually that good. You haven't made any new friends, so you're not actually as cool or as outgoing as you thought you were. You're sad, and so you're not strong. At the same time, my self-love practices started to fall through, making the weapons that much stronger. A little later, I enrolled in this leadership and coaching program. I started working with a life coach, and a few months later, started working with a new therapist. You may say I went all in on personal development. The truth is that I was just going for the next thing, fixing the next thing, learning the other thing, getting that extra thing for my next corporate career accomplishment. It just ended up being so much more than that. It ended up being more about discovering myself. And so I re-empowered my self-love practices and discovered some new ones. and I started to fall in love with me. In that path, I actually decided to leave my corporate job and go all in with coaching. This meant becoming an entrepreneur, which I never, ever, ever thought I would be. It also meant leaving behind the comfort of a steady paycheck and someone else calling the shots, for better or worse. It especially meant leaving behind these things that I had set up as conditions for my love. I went in with the excitement of following a passion and completely ignored the path I was no longer taking. I chose to not become a CFO. I chose to not climb the corporate ladder and get the corner office. I chose to not be a woman in business breaking the glass ceiling from within. I chose to not work with spreadsheets and numbers. I chose to not have a fancy role title I could show off to my family and friends. This feels really hard to say because those were all the things that made me worthy of my love. You may say, well, you've done all these other things. You've created now your own community here in Indy. You planned this beautiful wedding. You're creating a loving marriage. You've made some new friends. You took a chance and you're creating something of your own. If you agree, you probably played the same game I play. If blank, then love. It's all different flavors of the same ice cream, because what happens if I don't have friends? What happens if my business is struggling? What happens if my partner and I get in a fight and it doesn't feel rock solid? Then with that, the self-love falls also. In this last stretch, different weapon came up. Anybody here familiar with self-sabotage? Well, the way it looked like for me was random naps in the middle of the day, waking up late, and doing absolutely everything except what would grow my business, and then spending tons of time feeling horrible about the whole thing. I noticed it this time, and I started doing something different. I re-empowered my self-love practices. I created support structures with family, friends, with my teammates. I created this 5 a.m. club that has a workout first thing in the morning to love myself, feel stronger, thankfulness to begin and end the day, and a time to grow and reflect first thing in the morning. I would love to close this talk with a big bow and tell you I love myself unconditionally. And I am a human and a work in progress. The truth is that self-loathing is a habit, and self-love is a practice. And so what I'm going to leave you with is this: wash, rinse, repeat. It starts with noticing those conditions you put around your self-love and those habits of self-loathing. Then it comes choosing to do something different, choosing to love yourself just because, and creating structures around that. Practice choosing to love yourself right here, right now, just the way you are and the way you are not. Then choose again, and again, and again. Wash, rinse, repeat. Notice, choose, repeat. I love myself. I accept myself. I approve of myself. Thank you.
So, wash, rinse, and repeat is not just for your hair, okay? So, how would you suggest to the audience, what are some ways that they can begin to identify their weapons so that they can wash, rinse, and repeat in self-love?
Yeah, I think there's a lot about the words and the actions that we use for ourselves. So when you notice certain things that you tell yourself, just ask you, like, would you tell that to someone you love? Like, would you tell them to your favorite person, your best friend, your kid? And if not, then what's up? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, our next speaker, she found her truth after reading a book called Conversations with God. Now, somebody's read that book over here, yeah? Now it is her purpose to help others live authentically and to find their truths. And every time I see her, she makes me smile. So please welcome Trisha Phillips to the stage.
Good evening. I'm going to be honest with you. Up until this moment right here, I've only ever shared my speaking skills with corporate America. And when I initially decided to audition for the speaker series this evening, I had no idea what I was going to talk about. I mean, how do you take a topic like unconditional love, pick one aspect of that topic, and then talk about it for 10 minutes? Seemingly impossible. But I had this desire, this voice, this nudge inside of me encouraging me to do it. So I did probably the scariest thing I've ever done in my adult life, and I sent an email requesting an audition space, knowing I had nothing. Nothing. But you know, it's funny how the universe will speak to you if you're willing to listen. So a few days later, scrolling through social media, and I come across a story that sparks an idea. So this evening, I'd like to share with you 2 stories of heroism. The first story is about April Jones. Now, last year in August, she came home from work, and she had been having a pretty bad day. And as she often does, she decided to take a walk around a retention pond near her home to kind of shake off the bad day she had been having. And as she got done with her normal 1-mile walk, something inside of her encouraged her to do a second mile. And it was during that second mile that April came across a little boy who was playing precariously close to the retention pond. Now, being a mother herself, of course, immediately she starts yelling out words of caution to the little boy, and no sooner had those words left her mouth than she sees this little boy fall into the water. So, of course, she immediately starts running there, and as she gets closer, she realizes this little boy, he doesn't know how to swim. His arms are flailing, his head is bobbing above and below the water, and she knows it's only moments before he's going to go under. So, of course, she runs, she jumps in, is able to reach the little boy and bring him back to shore. Now, I think we can probably all agree that in that same situation, we would do the same thing. But what makes April a hero is that April doesn't know how to swim. And she had no idea at the moment that she ran and jumped into that water how deep it was going to be. Later, when she was being interviewed by the local news channel, they asked her, "Why did you do that?" And she replied, "I just panicked. I didn't even think about it. I just jumped in." Now, the second story I'd like to share with you, you might actually be familiar with because this happened recently. This story is about Wyatt, Dylan, Seth, and Nick. And just this past July, they were hanging around outside, and they started to smell smoke. So, of course, being curious young men that they were, they decided to do a little investigative reporting, and they started walking down the street to see if they could determine where the smoke's coming from. So, of course, as they're walking down the street, they come across a house that's on fire. Now, of course, they have no idea if there's anybody in the house at this point, but there's a house that's on fire, right? So they immediately all jump to and leap to action. 2 of the young men decided that they were going to try to gain entrance into the home using the front and the back door. The 3rd young man pulls out a cell phone to call 911 fire rescue, and the 4th young man runs to the nearest neighbor's house looking for an axe to maybe help them get into the house a little easier. Nick was the first person to gain entry into the home. Now, by this point, the house is filled with smoke. And of course, Nick had never been there before, so he had no idea what the layout of the house was, but that didn't matter. He runs into the home looking for someone, anyone that needs help. Eventually, he comes across Catherine, who is clearly disoriented, simply standing in her hallway, not knowing what to do. So, of course, he walks up to her, picks her up, and carries her out. Clearly, April and Nick, they were out of their minds when they did these things. And what I mean by that is that they were acting instinctively. They weren't thinking about their decisions. I mean, Nick wasn't standing there making a list of pros and cons on whether or not we should run into a burning building, right? No. These people simply saw individuals in peril, and they leapt to action to help them. I believe that God lives inside of us, not in some of us, in all of us. And when we are tied to our bodies, our ego maintains control of our decisions, and our ego wants to live. I mean, if you think about it, the main purpose of the ego is preservation of self, right? So if you were to ask your mind or your body, hey, do you think it's a good idea to run into a burning building? They're going like, no. We're going to go ahead and pass on that, right? But your soul, the part of you that is in communion with God and has access to God's wisdom, your soul will propel you into that fire every time. I believe that when we act out of our minds, that when we act instinctively, we are tapping into that wisdom and into our own divinity. The problem is that we allow our mind to override our instincts, we allow our ego to make our decisions for us, and when our ego makes those decisions, they are always going to be based in judgments. Have you ever been in a situation where you're walking down the street and up ahead you see a homeless man begging for money, and immediately you think about that $5 bill that you have in your pocket? But as you walk closer, your mind starts to convince you that he's not worthy. I mean, look at him. Look how dirty he is. He's lazy. If he would just get up, clean himself up, he could probably find a job. For that matter, I wouldn't be surprised if he lost his last job because of drug and alcohol. If I give him my $5, he's just going to go buy booze with it. Right? All of these thoughts are in your brain trying to convince you that he is not worthy of that $5 bill. The thing is your ego is self-serving. And it will always try to convince you that you are more important than them, that your needs are more important than their needs, and that is your $5. You worked for that $5. I mean, what if you need that later? You know, maybe you're going to get thirsty. But your soul knows the truth that we are all one. And what you do for one of us, you do for all of us. So what do I think is unconditional love? I believe that unconditional love is our nature. It is the essence of who we are. It is who we are when we're not even thinking about it. And when we allow our ego to live our lives and to make our decisions for us, we are literally defying our nature. What we need to learn how to do is to reconnect to that little voice, that quiet little voice that's inside of us, that quite frankly is probably being drowned out by the insistence of the ego. But if you can find that little voice and tune into it and listen to it, it will whisper to you the truth. And the truth is, our job is to love one another without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. Thank you. Great.
job. So, how would you suggest that we overcome our own egos so that we can display courageous acts of love?
Wow. I think that, I think it's very difficult to determine if it's your ego leading you around or if it's your soul speaking wisdom to you. So I think what I would ask myself is, this action that you're going to do or you're thinking about doing, who's it serving? Is it serving yourself? If so, that is your ego. If it is serving another, that is God.
Thank you. So, our next speaker is an international recording artist, and she is a DJ for the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever. And I'll share a little secret with you. She didn't used to like hugs. Please welcome Kristen KB Newton to the stage. Hey!
Hey! Oh yeah! I like that. I do. How y'all feeling? Y'all all right? Okay, so check it. Here's the thing. Is it just me, or does it feel like the only relationship dynamics that are worthy of unconditional love, the romantic or familial ones? Yeah? It's like we know a mother's love. We know the love that grandparents have for their grandkids. And we know the love that stands at the altar and says, I do. But why? Why isn't unconditional love commonly associated with friendship? I mean, maybe the benefit isn't as obvious, but if you were to ask me, and I am so glad that you did, I would have to strongly disagree. I believe that our friendships are the most influential relationships that we have, and that they produce the largest ripple effect in our other relationship dynamics. Yeah? Super deep. So I am a mom of a 2-year-old, and so I get it. I get that overwhelming, inexplainable love that just almost appears when you see that child for the first time. Even after your body goes through what feels like the worst pain that you could possibly imagine. I also know the love that comes from being connected by bloodline. I remember when I was dating, weighing the options of who do I want to love unconditionally for the rest of my life? Because in marriage, unconditional love is expected. And that beautiful picture of sacrifice and bliss and romance and like that is like the ultimate picture of love for some. And I think I believe that. Having watched my grandmother pass away recently at the age of 92, she was married for 72 years. That is unconditional love. But in friendship, we don't have the same tenacity to bear with one another, to endure through hard things. Maybe the social media culture has made it easy just to friend and unfriend those that you are no longer impressed with, right? Those who you don't agree with. Maybe it's easy just to move on past those people who no longer share the same life phase. But if you ask me, I would say that if you are not a good friend, you're probably not going to be a good boyfriend or girlfriend. If you're not a good friend, you're probably not going to be a good spouse. If you're not a good friend, you're probably not going to be a good coworker. Because again, in friendship, it's the relationship that causes the largest ripple effect in our relationships with other people. Now I'm going to ask a question. Who in here would say that making friends as an adult is hard? Okay, it looks like we've got some varying opinions in the room. Let's go ahead and just call you out. All right, so I need Gen X's and baby boomers, so that's 40 and up. Who thinks that making an adult is hard, or making friends as an adult is hard? Okay, all right. The rest of you have this adulting thing figured out. Y'all are good. Y'all don't even need to listen to anything else I have to say. Okay, what about Gen Z? So that's like maybe high school, college age. Any of you in the room? Somebody drag you out? One, got it. Is making friends as an adult hard? Yes. Listen, it's probably, Adulting is kind of being redefined every day with every new and awakening hashtag for you, probably, maybe. I don't know. I feel for you. I do. What about the millennials in the room? That's that post-college, upper 30s crew. Yes, that's us. Woo woo. We're either running full on into adulting for the first time or navigating the newest seasons of parenting and or marriage. But regardless, all of us are longing for deep, meaningful connections. I'm just convinced we don't know how to make them. Now, post-college, I went to work at a Christian sports camp, and it was probably one of the more life-changing experiences I've ever had. But shortly after I arrived at this camp, I realized that they had some procedures and policies that I wasn't really excited about. Mainly one thing, and that is that the female staff and the male staff separately each, every morning had to give each other morning hugs. Here's the thing, wasn't a hugger. Yeah. So, hugs just felt uncomfortable and a bit vulnerable to me. I mean, think about it. When you go to hug someone, you literally open yourself up to the other person. Is everybody thinking about this right now? You are completely exposed. You are vulnerable. You're susceptible to anything, attack, just all kinds of stuff. And I didn't just have this perception about hugs, I had this perception about people in life. I thought that's how relationships were. If I opened myself up to you, I might get hurt. So I walked around like this, guarded, protected, keeping myself from being exposed. Yeah, that didn't matter. The next morning, I had 22 women swarming around me waiting for their morning hug at camp, okay? They weren't really too concerned about all of my baggage that I was bringing at the time. And I'm sure there's some psychology around this whole 8 hugs a day, is good for you. And it doesn't really matter. All of it was stressing me out. But at the end of that 2-month experience, I had learned a lot of things. One main thing being that whatever I thought being intentional and connecting wasn't actually being intentional and connecting. I had reserved this space of being vulnerable, confessing, debriefing, just showing up as my most authentic self, expressing expectation, boundaries. I had kind of reserved all of those things for some relationship that would come later on in life, right? I was not prepared to do all of those things with these people at this camp, right? But I'm so glad that I did, because the relationships and friendships that I formed at that camp became some of the most influential relationships that I still now have today. And they have influenced the way that I show up as a wife, as a mom, and as a friend in my other relationships. We all want deep, meaningful connections, and unconditional love should be a part of those deep, meaningful connections. The thing is, when it comes to friendship, we don't want to put in the work to establish what it takes to have unconditional love in our friendships. Now, my daughter, Amari, she is 2, like I said earlier, and she's just now navigating this new world of friendships. She knows me as mom and dad and auntie and uncle and cousins and G-Paw and granny, and she knows them. But whenever she sees a new group of people, she's like, Mom, I gotta go play with my friends. And I'm usually trying to figure out who those people are. Like, do we know these people? Really? But in her mind, she has distinguished at 2 years old that friends are not family. They're friends. She wants to connect and to meet these people. Now, I'm sure in 28 years, she'll want to talk to me about boyfriends and marriage, and I'm fine with that. Yes. In 28 years, we can have that conversation. But in the meantime, I do want her to be loving unconditionally in her friendships and being intentional in those relationship dynamics. Now, as adults, I suggest that we take a lesson from Amari and that we are intentional about our friendships. I think we can do this with Hart convos, intentional conversations that create space to be vulnerable, to be honest, to be real, transparent. Now, you're like, what did you say? You said Hart convos? Yes, Hart convos. Hart is just an acronym for honest, elephant-sized, authentic, real, transparent, and convo is just short for conversation. Now we can dive in a little bit to what heart combos look like in friendship. So when being honest in friendship, the temptation is not to be truthful. It's way easier to lie, but don't, okay? The first one's pretty easy. Elephant-sized pretty much means that you might be addressing an elephant in the room that both of you know is there, but nobody wants to talk about. Or elephant-sized could be an issue or trauma or difficult thing in your life that just seems larger than life, okay? Having that conversation. Authentic. Authentic pretty much is a challenge for you to show up as your most authentic self. Not to become who you think the person wants you to be, but to just be who you are. Yes. Real is not about being real. It's about addressing real issues in real time. So, not keeping a ledger or a record of offenses with your friend, but when things happen, addressing them in real time. Transparent means exposing those things that the person otherwise would not see unless you showed them, okay? That is how you have a heart conversation. And every day, I'm sure all of you are working to do that, to be honest, showing up as your most authentic self, addressing real issues in real time, being transparent. And I think that this is how we love our friends. This is how we love unconditionally. Because remember, if we do the work in friendship, we can cause the largest ripple effect in every other relationship dynamic concerning unconditional love. Now, this is what I would like for you to do. Don't wait. Don't wait. Don't wait until you're dating to work on being a good listener. Don't wait until you're ready to settle down and start addressing the real issues in life. Don't wait until that unexpected fight on your honeymoon to let that be the first time that you're trying to work through conflict. And don't wait 72 years before you realize that you've never felt the freedom to show up as your most authentic self. Tonight, let's make a shift. Let's work and practice on being honest, and let's practice working through conflict. And most importantly, let's practice loving our friends unconditionally. Thank you.
Yeah. You know I'm gonna do it. Hug. She's a hugger now, guys.
I am a hugger. I am a hugger.
So what advice would you give those that maybe feel they're a little rocky in the friend area? What is their first step into putting themselves out there so that they can make friends?
First step to making friends as an adult, just do it. It's going to be different for everyone. Some of you in here are introverted and are like, absolutely not. No, but all of us are different, and we all have our own life experiences. But I would just say make it a priority. Choose to make friends. Choose to put yourself out there to make connections with people who aren't romantic relationships or connections or family, because there's something about you that someone else needs. And all of these relationships really are connected and help us to be better people in our other relationship dynamics. So just do it. That's my advice. Don't think too hard about it. Just do it.
Just do it. Thank you. So our fourth speaker tonight, she is an author of a book called Love You More, Poems and Affirmations. She is a former psychiatric nurse, and for that position, you definitely need to display a lot of unconditional love. Welcome our next speaker, Katuashia Thomas.
Tonight I share the poetry of my healing. I believe that unconditional love was weaved into our DNA at conception, and that the ability to love others must flow through the love that we hold for self. I believe that unconditional love begins with self-love, and that you cannot love self without first acknowledging your secret places, often called brokenness. Now, having unconditional love for self is easier said than done because people typically don't practice self-love activities as we should. We overextend and we sacrifice ourselves for those that we love. And we sacrifice ourselves for the career paths that we choose. And we take on unnecessary strain and we justify it by labeling it bettering ourselves. And we forget about the one person who matters, the one person in the equation we should dedicate to, self. I started sharing my thought on unconditional self-love in October of 2014 as I was navigating through a healing process. I created a Facebook page called Love You More, and I used it as a journal to help quiet the noise in my world. Now, at the time, I was only connected with 20 of my closest friends and family, of which shared my entries with their friends, who then shared my entries with their friends, and so on. You know how that goes. And one day, I received a message on a post from a woman telling me that my insight has given her the courage to change and love herself more. And I tell you, never in a million years would I have ever imagined that my thought could be that influential to inspire a woman that I do not know to change and invest in self-love. Now, I've had 43 cycles around the sun, and at sun cycle 9, childhood abandonment and its negative projection imprinted on my soul. Imagine sitting in the window at the tender age of 9, praying that your dad would pick you up like he promised so many times before, praying that this time he would just show up. Now imagine falling asleep in that window and the very next day waking with the same prayer. The first man that should have loved me without condition had conditions. I was an option and not a priority. Now, in hindsight, the relationship with my biological father set the tone for every intimate relationship that I would experience in my sun cycles, all because he didn't show up for me. Now imagine, if you would, experiencing the loss of a marital covenant, and because of that loss, you are left feeling emotionally drained, unworthy of love, maybe even feeling as though you have no purpose or no direction, and you're fearful of next steps. With true transparency and humility, I will submit that I've experienced both. Sun cycle 39 began my journey to unconditional self-love. In March of 2014, the world as I knew it was disrupted. The person that I shared my secrets with, that was supposed to love me unconditionally, betrayed me with the act of infidelity. Now, the heartbreak that I endured as a result of this action crushed every positive thought that I had about myself. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why? Well, because I lost my identity in being a wife, and I neglected the needs of the individual that counted the most, self. Now, I loved everything about being a wife. The intimacy, the emotional connection with another soul, the family nights, the vacations, church on Sunday with my family, the date nights. How I sacrificed my self-worth. And I ignored my self-care, all in the name of love. And then it was over. And there I was, sitting alone in the window with abandonment again. The covenant just didn't show up for me. Now, while sitting alone with abandonment, I was uncomfortable because this was a space that I had stockpiled all of my pain and my disappointments in, and I never expected to return to this space. And now I am surrounded by abandonment issues as well as other issues that I've never addressed. And I began to experience boundless grief, anxiety, and depression. I questioned my worth. I released self-defeating words to the universe. I felt like a failure that no longer had an identity. And so I stayed in the room with abandonment for countless weeks, stuck in a defeated state of thought. And then love extended grace. One day, I received a text from a telephone number that I did not recognize, and this text changed my view. This text read, "The reward of labor is life. Hang in there, everything will be all right." Now, I tried calling this number back, and it was unreachable, and to this day, I have no idea who sent that message, but it was the message that sparked a small flame bright enough for me to see a path, and I knew that I could no longer sit in the room with abandonment again. I knew that I had to do for myself what no other person could. I had to show up for the little girl that fell asleep in the window. And showing up meant that I had to allow myself to feel. I had to feel the pain and the disappointments that I had stockpiled, and I had to learn how to show myself compassion in extreme distress. And I can honestly say that the action of extending myself compassion was problematic because compassion is complicated. It's tricky. See, as I was navigating through the transition of healing, I still beat myself up with the should've, would've, could've syndrome, but here is where I found mercy. Through therapy, I've learned to identify my storm and make a conscious decision to release or surrender my will to control it. Now, I tell you, I didn't get this right all the time. I failed many times. But as I adopted the practice of surrendering, the action got easier. Because I realized that unforgiveness cradled anger. Forgiveness released anger, and forgiveness released me. Now, over time, unconditional love and self-compassion taught me to love me more. During moments of extreme distress, I've learned that I must identify what I am feeling and do positive self-talk to redirect the way that I feel when thoughts and words are striking me in a negative manner. It is okay to love me more in those moments. Now, the kindness of self-compassion led me to another pivotal moment in my healing journey. This step was unavoidable because if I wanted to continue to move through my healing process, I had to acknowledge my brokenness and how I contributed to it. I acknowledged that I made self-defeating decisions for myself, and I allowed others to make self-defeating decisions for me. I acknowledged that I accepted emotional abuse in the name of love. I acknowledged that I allowed my self-worth to be dictated by the actions of others, and I allowed my lack of self-worth to impact my self-esteem. And finally, I acknowledged that low self-esteem dictated the way that I loved myself and prevented me from setting healthy boundaries. So tonight, I've shared a portion of my truth with you. But this is what I pray you take away from it. Unconditional self-love is an action that is fluid and it does not yield to external pressures. To have unconditional self-love means that you choose yourself. You must be a priority to yourself. It means that you take ownership for the bad decisions that you've made and you forgive yourself. It means that you care for your emotional, physical needs. It means that you surrender your will to control circumstances that you cannot. And to conclude, it means that you will no longer sacrifice yourself for anyone or anything else. May you know grace. May you know peace. And may you know love. Thank you for holding space with me.
You must first love yourself before you love anyone else. Self-love you have to make a priority in your life, right?
Correct.
So for those in the audience that may be sitting in their own room of abandonment, how would you suggest they begin to escape?
Acknowledge where you are. That's the first step. The second step is get some help. Talk to someone. Get a tribe around you.
Thank you. Get some help, find that tribe, and begin those heart combos, as KB said. So our next speaker coming to the stage is the author of The Burnout Factor, and she has traveled the world only to find out that all the love she needed was right inside of her. Please welcome April Ervin.
Unconditional love. Unconditional love, as these beautiful ladies have already shared, is love without conditions. In the Bible, agape love is described as the love that God has for his people and the love we are called to share with one another. So that's my foundation today when I think about unconditional love, but I'm a firm believer that in order to share where we are today, we have to talk about from where we have come. So just as KB shared, I'm going to ask you to engage in a heart combo with me. Can you do that? Yeah. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm going to take you back to 1974. The pictures you see on the screen are me around the age of 4 years old. Now, I know what you're saying. Wow, I didn't know she was that old. But what I will say to you is I have good genes, a beautiful 72-year-old mother, and black don't crack. That's all I can say. So this is little April when I was in preschool, and I attended Ding Dong College, and I was the president of my class. My brother called me the head ding dong. No matter, achievement was in my spirit very early in my life. And I remember feeling so much unconditional love when I was at preschool. And while I cannot visually see these women, I can still feel the love that they showered on our little selves in those little chairs. And I also can feel the love that my family showed me. Some years ago, recently, my father shared with me that the first time my mother dropped me off at preschool, she cried all the way to work. Any mothers, fathers in here, do you cry? So that was my foundation of unconditional love during that time in my life. However, just a few short years later, that foundation dramatically shifted. little April was exposed to something that she could not process. She was exposed to sexual abuse and molestation that forever changed the trajectory of her life and changed her in ways that her little mind, body, spirit, and soul could truly not comprehend. As a result of this shift in foundation in unconditional love, by her 20s, she had experienced sexual abuse, molestation, rape, and promiscuity. Let me breathe on that, because I recognize that is very heavy. Despite that, little April went on to achieve a great deal in her life. She went on to attend the best schools in the country. She got her MBA from the University of Michigan. Go Blue. Any Go Blue in here? Go Blue, yes. And went on to achieve a great deal in her career. And by 30 years old, she was indoctrinated into the six-figure club, which she thought was going to last forever, but that did not. It's coming back. But she had the Chicago condo, the Mercedes-Benz, and the clothes to go along with it. So she had everything that society would say is success. She had achieved everything. However, that newly tainted foundation of unconditional love had dramatically changed things for her. The picture you now see is little April, now adult April, at the age of 40 years old. And I titled this picture My Greatest Teacher because it was. This was my time to really learn about who I was. So I was in Cape Town, South Africa at this time. I was celebrating my 40th birthday, and I was at the top of Table Mountain, but literally at the bottom in my soul. And sometimes I look at this picture and smile a little bit because I have a sweatshirt over my stomach. It was 100 degrees in Africa. But I was trying to hide something. You ladies or some men can relate. You're just trying to hide a little something. But the reality is I was hiding so much more. That was my armor. That was my armor. That was my way to keep everyone out. And it was also my way to keep everything in. And so I walked around with that 100 pounds of armor because little April was still deeply pained on the inside. Sometime after this, my life took another dramatic shift, and things changed for me in a very significant way. However, what I didn't realize is that God was opening the door for me to experience a 7-year journey that would change my entire life. He took me through a process that would change me completely. And so some years ago, I sat at church in the sanctuary, and my pastor said, anybody in here ever had a situation where all of a sudden your whole life gets thrown up in the air and you lose your health, you lose your house, you lose your car, and you lose your business? Well, that's called a divine storm. That's when God shifts everything in your life to change you, deliver you, and heal you, and bring you closer to Him. And as I sat there, I wanted to raise my hand because that's exactly what happened to me. At the age of 42, I lost all of that, the Chicago condo, the Mercedes, all of that. I lost everything at that age. But what I didn't realize is I was gaining so much more because God was opening the door for me to experience a healing that I just to this day cannot describe. But I have a real relationship with God, so I often say to Him, you sure have a strange way of bringing people closer to you. And you could have did that a little bit differently. I always say it felt like surgery without anesthesia. You could have gave me a shot in the arm or something. But, nevertheless, His ways are not my ways and His thoughts are not my thoughts. Clearly. But what it allowed me to go through is what He called His 7 pillars of soul restoration. Because the reality is I was walking around with deep holes in my soul. And they could only be filled up by Jesus. There was no other way. But He dug deep within me and transformed and delivered me spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, nutritionally, financially, and sexually. 7 is the number of completion. So I emerged from this journey a complete person, not a perfect person, but God's definition of completion. But along that way, that 7-year journey, and this is year number 7, praise the Lord, because it has to be over. But along that way, I had a lot of questions. It was excruciatingly painful. It was not easy to experience what I experienced. I mean, I was 42 and I moved back in with my mother and father. after 20 years of being on my own. So that and I almost lost my sanity there. I love my mother and father. But what it allowed was for me to have the opportunity to really dig deep. And along the way, God sent the God winks. I just had random strangers come up to me and start talking to me, which was interesting. But they would always be saying something that I know came from him. And so one day I had left church, and I was down here at the canal walking around, and I was just not in a good place. I was pretty sad, just like, oh my God, what happened to my life? Why am I in Indianapolis? I should be in Chicago. What is going on? Like, why did I lose everything? What happened? And I sat down on the bench just trying to engage in the beauty around me, and I saw a man go by on his bike, and then he came back. And he came over to me and he said, ma'am, I don't need to startle you, but God wanted me to remind you that he's still able. I said, and tears just flowed down my face, because guess what song we sang at church an hour ahead? God is able. God wink. Another God wink. I spent a lot of time at Starbucks at this time. That was my second home. If you live with your parents at 42, you would also want to go somewhere. I said, actually, I was going to write the CEO of Starbucks and say, you know, we should have a conversation, because I've been in a lot of Starbucks around here. But I was at Starbucks, and I was in line getting my latte, and I had a copy of my Bible, and I had picked up A Course in Miracles on my table. And this man came up behind me. He said, well, those are some nice books. I said, oh, thank you. And so he started talking to me, as many times happen. He just told me his life story. His story was my story. He had been through a similar journey and had moved back to Indianapolis, to his hometown, after losing everything. So we got into this wonderful conversation. And then he said, well, I need to head out. He said, but I want to remind you, when you see a rainbow in the sky, that means that God keeps his promises. And again, I was stunned. Just the day before, my mother and I were walking down the street with our dogs, and I felt a tap that told me to look up. I looked up, and I saw a rainbow fully encapsulating the sun. Another God wink to remind me that as I was going through this journey, he was with me in a strange way, but he was with me. So I got those God winks along the way. Along the way, too, what I tried to do was really fill myself up with things that would encourage me and inspire me. So I spent a lot of Sundays watching Oprah Super Soul Sunday. I don't even know if that's still on. But I would spend hours like, give me something, fill me up, give me something here. And one day I watched it, and it was a panel, and it was Oprah, Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins, and Bishop T.D. Jakes. And Bishop Jakes said something, and I literally felt like he was talking through the TV to me, because he said, he said that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And I sat there, and that just sat in my spirit. I'll say it again. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The reality is, I have been drinking a lot of poison, because I had a lot of unforgiveness in my heart. I had a lot of unforgiveness to those that harmed little April many years ago. I had a lot of unforgiveness to those that I felt hurt me in some way. And the two people, when I would pray about who I needed to forgive the most, you know the two people I needed to forgive the most? Me and him. Myself for the mistakes that I made, and also God, because I questioned a God that would allow me to experience all this. But the beauty of it is, when I started truly embracing forgiveness, that's when transformation happened. That's when deliverance happened. And I begin to say on a daily basis, I forgive anyone who's ever hurt me in any way, and I pray anyone I have hurt in any way can please forgive me. And I would feel a physiological shift in my body. So I'm going to ask you all, I ask for a heart convo. I want you to engage in this with me, and I want you to repeat after me. I forgive anyone who has ever hurt me in any way, and I pray that anyone I have hurt in any way can please forgive me. Amen. Yes. So there is power in our speaking forgiveness. And forgiveness is a process, because I speak it over and over and over again. And I still smile when I ask who I need to forgive most, and it's still me and him. I'm like, okay, well, it's me and you. We're going to keep forgiving each other until this forgiveness happens. But as I went along the way as well, I was blessed finally to have another home of my own, little apartment that I loved. And one day I was in my prayer closet, and I still question. I mean, I don't know what your relationship is with God, but mine is one still, why? Why? I want to know why. So I was journaling in my prayer closet and writing some things down, and I asked him why. And this appeared on my paper, purpose. So as tears shed down my face, that's the word, purpose. And I said, purpose? What purpose? Whose purpose? Why? What purpose is that? My purpose. Because the reality is there is power in our vulnerability. Our healing and deliverance is in our ability to speak our truth. And I questioned, in all honesty, how much I was going to share tonight. But the reality is I have to have the courage to speak my truth and not worry about anybody's thoughts or repercussions. And I also realized that in my speaking my truth, if one person is blessed, then I've served my purpose. I've served my purpose. Even though my dear mother would always say, why are you always telling everybody your business? So I got confirmations along the way. And a friend of mine sent me this Instagram post. Maybe you went through it and survived it just so you could help someone else make it through. So that is the purpose. So I'm grateful to share with you all that little April and adult April have made their return to unconditional love, because I have emerged from this journey, this long 7-year journey, with a greater love, joy, peace, and happiness and contentment than I have ever experienced in my entire life. And so despite that experience, that's where I am today. So I'm grateful for the entirety of the experience. I often say that I would not trade my journey for $1 billion, but when I didn't have any money, you could give me $50. I'm like, I'm hungry, I gotta eat, give me some money. That's what I say to Jesus. You know, we need money down here. I don't know what you're doing up there, but we need money down here. But I am eternally grateful to be at this place. And so I have a personal mission statement that I say almost every day. And it's guided by scripture that says Psalm 139, 13, and 14. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. And then I go on to look in my mirror and I say, I expect and receive nothing but God's best in every aspect of my life. I am God's masterpiece, and I am worthy of all he has for me. I am the gift, and anyone is honored to have me in their life. I am only treated with love, respect, and kindness. I am the prize, and I am being pursued. I need not force anything to occur in my life. I only need to rest in his presence, and I am worthy of only God's best. So that is what I affirm every day. Thank you. Now share one other thing that speaks to my spirit. I am what I am today because God used my mistakes. He worked them for my good, like no one else ever could. It was necessary. So thank you for allowing me to share my journey. We got the red dress.
I know. We're twinsies.
Yes.
So we are so grateful that you shared your struggles with us all, because your story is someone else's breakthrough.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
I always say that there is purpose in your pain, but it's up to you to figure out what that purpose is. Otherwise, you're suffering for nothing.
Amen. Definitely.
So what would you say is the first step in turning your whole into a whole?
I would probably say the first step is give yourself some grace. We all make mistakes. None of us are perfect, and we're going to keep on making mistakes. But give yourself some grace, and also give yourself permission to go deep within, to really examine it for yourself before you even share with anybody else. Just take your time to focus on you and give yourself some grace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our final speaker tonight has auditioned for Walk the Talk Speaker Series 6 times, and we are honored and grateful that she is here speaking on our stage for her 3rd time. Please welcome Miss Margie Worrell.
Hello, friends. I am so blessed and honored and grateful to be sharing this stage tonight with these 5 amazing women who have shared the beautiful stories about unconditional love with you. And I'm really excited to continue the conversation with you tonight. Now, I do have to be honest with you. As I got ready to do this talk, I started researching and thinking about unconditional love. And the first thing I often do with these talks is I break the words apart and really look at the words. And that always causes trouble for me. So this was really no exception. I broke the words apart and I looked at the first word, the big word, love. Love is a many-splendored thing, but it's also rather confusing from time to time. You know what I mean? So I started thinking about love, and I started thinking about things that I love, right? And I thought, there's a lot of things I love. I love Ben & Jerry's New York Super Fudge Chunk ice cream. No lie, if you haven't tried it, you have to. I also love my 2 amazing, beautiful children, Jacob and Emily. Do you realize I just used the exact same word to describe my feelings for a frozen dessert product and the 2 most important people on the planet? I mean, what is that? That is so confusing. I mean, in our language, we are very limited in how we can talk about different forms of love. In the Sanskrit language, they have nearly 100 different phrases for terms of endearment. The Greek have 6 different stages that you go through when you're in love. And in the Arab language, they actually have 11 different phases and terms around terms of endearment. Yet in the English language, we only seem to have this one tired, worn out word that we just keep using over and over again. I just simply don't get it. And then put on top of that the word unconditional. Oh, that starts a whole nother thing. Started thinking about conditions, right? If you filled out a contract or terms of agreement anytime in the last few years, you're going to notice that sprinkled throughout that document, you're going to find little asterisks and then matching asterisks at the bottom of the page. And those little tiny asterisks say in little tiny print, some terms and conditions may apply. Right? That's because we humans don't like to be taken by surprise. We like to kind of hedge our bets a little bit, right? We want to make sure that no matter what happens, we got our bases covered. So there are very few things on this planet that don't come with conditions, even relationships. I want to look at different types of love. For example, I can say I love inanimate objects like ice cream, but for this example, I'm going to use my car. I have a car out in the parking lot. It's a little blue Prius. I love it so much. I really do. I named it Old Blue. And I do love my Prius. I give it gas. I give it oil. I take it to the car wash and sometimes get the deluxe car wash. I pour love into my little Prius, but I will tell you right now that if I walk out into that parking lot tonight and that car doesn't start to take me home, that love relationship is done. I am in the car lot tomorrow looking for new red. Old Blue, you're out the window, okay? I mean, I kind of have some conditions on my love for Old Blue. It has to operate, it has to function, right? Well, what about friendships, okay? Let's say I have a friend and I'm always calling and I'm always texting, I'm always planning things with them, and they're never calling me back and they're never texting me, and they break every single engagement that we have. Well, I'm giving a lot of love to that friendship, but if it doesn't come back to me, eventually that friendship's gonna die, right? What about romance? So let's say that I'm pouring my emotional self into my lover. I'm giving them my spirit, my soul, my heart, my being, and they're giving me nada. Eventually, I'm going to walk away from that relationship. And psychiatrists and psychologists would actually say, in these circumstances, having unconditional love isn't very healthy for you, right? So I started thinking, okay, where do I see unconditional love on this planet? So I started talking to my friends and coming up with ideas, and there were two ideas that really rose to the top for me, okay? And they were almost tied for this talk, okay? The one you're not gonna get to hear tonight is, is dogs, okay? Right, I have a dog at home. He's a Westie. I know he loves me unconditionally, even when he pees on my carpet. I know he loves me unconditionally, okay? But I decided against doing a talk on dogs because I know there are cat people in the audience. And they can kind of be sensitive sometimes. That's kind of one of those things. So I didn't want to offend the cat people, so I decided to steer away from dogs. And I actually went with the top one in my heart, and that's motherhood. I believe it was Robert Browning that said, "Motherhood, all love begins and ends there." And I truly believe that motherhood done right is the most pure and special form of love on our planet. And tonight, it reminds me of a story that I want to tell you about a very strong love that a mother had. This story starts back in the middle of the last century, in 1940. A young woman was born second into a family to her older sister, and that's where she remained. She always felt second place. Her father loved her older sister so much and doted on her and gave her attention and paid very little attention to this young woman. He was emotionally immature and insensitive, and she developed some problems with self-esteem because she did not feel loved in her family of origin. And as she went into school, that low self-esteem followed her, and it was hard for her to form friendships where she felt truly connected and loved. The same thing applied when she started to date. She picked young men who were very much like her father, emotionally unavailable, immature, and distant. And in fact, she married a young man who was much like that. And she kind of had resigned herself to the fact that she didn't really deserve that kind of love, that this was her lot in life. And as time passed, she became pregnant with their first child. She was expecting their first child. And she suddenly thought, this is going to be my unconditional love. I'm going to have this baby, and I'm going to pour my love into it, and this baby is going to love me back in return. So in August of 1960, she delivered a beautiful baby girl, and she named her Janet. And she had all these visions of what life with Janet would be like. She would take her to the park. They would catch butterflies together. She would push her in the swing. She would talk to her about boys and hair and makeup. And she would hear Janet say, "Mom, I love you." She was so excited to get started on this journey with her new little baby girl. But as her baby started to grow, she noticed that she wasn't hitting the milestones the way other babies did. She wasn't sitting up on her own. She wasn't really making eye contact or reaching for her toys. And she wasn't really connecting with the outside world in the way that babies normally do. So the young woman took her to see a specialist, and that's when she got the devastating news that Janet had been born with a genetic defect, and she would never function past the age of a 6-month-old. The doctors told her that Janet would never walk, she would never dress herself, she would never feed herself, and she would never talk. she would never say the words, "I love you, Mom." And in that moment, that young woman's dreams evaporated. But one thing did not evaporate. There was one thing in that moment that stayed strong and maybe even became even stronger and more fierce. And that was that young woman's love for her baby. You see, she loved that baby unconditionally, even though she knew that baby would never be able to return that love in the way that she had planned. And as time passed, Janet got to be 2 years old. The young woman had been tending to her at home for all this time, for 2 years. But she hit a point where Janet's medical needs and her physical needs were actually beyond the capabilities of this young woman. And the doctors made a recommendation that Janet be institutionalized. And it broke the young woman's heart, because she wanted very much to keep Janet with her. But knowing that that's what was best for Janet, the young woman made that decision to have Janet be cared for in an institution. But her love never diminished. They went on as a couple to have 4 more children. All of them were born genetically typical and normal and perfect. And that young woman taught each one of them about unconditional love through her relationship with Janet. She would take the children to go and meet with Janet and visit Janet and talk to Janet and sit with Janet. She would talk about how each of us has a special gift to bring to the world, and each of us is uniquely made. She would talk about the light inside each one of us. She would put Janet's picture up by the Christmas tree at the holidays so that the siblings could remember their sister. And the siblings all knew that the young woman loved them just as unconditionally as she loved Janet. Now, you may be wondering how I know so much about this story. And the way that I know so much about this story is I am one of the 4 children. Janet is my older sister. And the young woman that I'm talking about is my amazing, strong, and beautiful mother, Martha Knopf, who is with us here in the audience tonight. You may also be wondering, how does this story apply to me? What do I need to know from this? And here's what I would share with you. I want you to think back to the beginning of the story. And I want you to think back to, where did this unconditional love come from? I mean, something can't come from nothing. So where did it come from? Did it come from her family of origin? No. Did it come from her friends? No. Did it come from her husband? No. So where did it come from? I believe it came from the divine. I believe it came from the peace of a higher power that lives inside my mother. And in that moment, when all of her dreams were crushed and her heart was broken, she opened her heart to that higher power. And it flowed in to her, that limitless source of love. And she was able to then share that love with all of us. And what this has to do with you is that each one of you has that same higher power within you. Each one of you has the ability to tap into that and to let that flow through you and out to others in your world. And the more that you can tap into that love, that knowing that you are truly loved, that you are divine, that you are a spirit of the universe, When you can tap into that and know it and feel it and let it flow through you to others, you're going to see unconditional love everywhere. Before I leave the stage tonight, I want to leave you with a symbol. This is the symbol my mother always does to us whenever we leave and part ways. And when I see this symbol, the I love you symbol, I know that it means I am unconditionally loved. And I'm showing it to you tonight because I know that you are unconditionally loved too. Thank you.
So, unfortunately, not all of us have been able to experience unconditional love. So, for those in the audience that haven't been able to experience that type of love, how do we begin to display something that we've never experienced before?
I think that's a really great question. I think the first thing is that you have to believe that you have a little piece of the divine inside you. We all do. When you look at yourself in the mirror, I want you to say to yourself, man, I am a child of the universe, and I am freaking awesome, because you are. And if you say that to yourself often enough, you just might start to believe it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsey.
So, as I was sitting backstage, I realized that some of us have trouble giving and receiving unconditional love because we don't feel that we're good enough and deserve unconditional love ourselves. So I want all of you to repeat after me. Can you do that? Yeah. Okay, great. I like this side right here. You guys pick it up, pick it up. So, I am not just good enough. But I am more than good enough. Of receiving unconditional love. And I am fully capable. Of giving unconditional love. Give yourself a round of applause. Now, let's welcome all of our phenomenal speakers back out on the stage. Come on out, guys. Come on in. Come on in.
Give it up for these beautiful speakers. Beyond words, I don't know what else to say tonight. Thank you all for your beautiful, passionate stories. If you guys don't know our YouTube channel, Walk the Talk Speaker Series, their videos will be on there in about 3 weeks. And thank you for everybody that helped make this happen. You guys are now part of official hashtag Walk the Talk Tribe. And we hope to see you again. Our next event is on Abundance, which is December 4th. And if you're interested in auditioning, email me, walkthetalkseries@gmail.com. And also, we're taking Walk the Talk to the next step. We're trying to take this to, and we call it Walk the Talk at Work, and take this into people's workplace and share this same energy with people to create a better work environment for them. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. The big tall guy right in the middle there, he kind of was a big part of this idea. Anyway, so thank you, Kevin. Anyway, so if anybody knows, like anybody where you work that might be interested, email me their name and I'll contact them. And once again, that's walkthetalkseries@gmail.com. So I was trying to think of what to say, and one of the phrases that was on the slideshow, I'm going to read it again because for me, either whether it's love or unconditional love, this is really great. After mastering the wind, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness the energy of love. And then, for a second time in the history of the world, men will have discovered fire again. So let us know that we all need to embrace love to light this world on fire again. So anyway, so thank you guys. Another bow. Woo! And, special thanks to Hannah, our stage manager. Yeah. And to Walk the Talk band. Woohoo! And to the guys that are videotaping and the sound guy way back up there. Thank you, Al. Okay, are you ready for the balloon drop? Okay, bring the lights up, please. Lights up. Okay, so right up there, there's 150 balloons, and I know there's a few more people, but in each balloon there is a motivational phrase, and it's going to fall down on you, and whoever's in the middle, just knock them out so everybody tries to get one. You can either pop the balloon now and read the phrase, or take it home like a fortune cookie and read it later. So are you ready? Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Woo! Thank you! Wave the camera.